On his right in the choir is his wife, Beverly. On his left is his reputed mistress, Jenny Nishik Corley. She's the ex-wife of one of Hyles' former deacons. The two women have ignored each other for years.
How y'all doing?
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am Jen, this is Fundie Fridays. If you're new here on my channel, I talk about different aspects of Christian fundamentalism while doing my makeup. And I gotta address this right now. Over the last 2 weeks, my channel has completely exploded. Double, triple, quadruple the number of subscribers. Duggars has hit 1 million views. Gag of the century. I can't even believe it. I hope that this episode lives up to all the hype. Making these videos really is a dream come true for me. I've always loved writing and doing creative things. And as an only child, I have a passion for talking to myself. We are going to be discussing the godfather of the independent fundamental Baptist movement, Jack Hyles. Hyles boasted a massive sphere of influence and unchecked power over hundreds of thousands of people. He founded Hyles-Anderson College, had a huge K-12 private school, world's largest Sunday school, pastor school, media programs, the list truly goes on. Of course, with a topic like this, it would be impossible to cover all of the details without making a Lord of the Rings length series. So I encourage anyone interested in the topic to read further into it. I highly recommend the Preacher Boys podcast and Your Queer Story podcast, both of which I got a lot of information for this video and go way more in depth than I can. Jack Fraser Hyles was born September 25th, 1926. He was born and raised in Italy, Texas, which is near Dallas. Jack was born to an impoverished family and to an alcoholic father who routinely abused him and eventually left the family. As soon as he was able to, Jack joined the military, enlisted in the United States Army, and served as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division during World War II. It was around this time that he met and married his wife, Beverly. Hyles would go on to pursue his college education at East Texas Baptist University. After graduation, he began pastoring at various Baptist churches across the country. This is from Chicago Magazine. Hyles was a full-fledged, fire-breathing, stem-winding spellbinder, blessed with a booming preacher's voice, a savant's recall of the Bible, and a charisma that could almost magically levitate people from their seats to surrender their lives to the Savior. Outbursts of anger, an unwillingness to brook criticism, and a penchant for iron-fisted control were also part of his repertoire. He was a genius, recalls a former member of the Hammond Church who has edited some of Jack Shapp's books. He also had a nasty, nasty temper. He used his temper as a form of control. Hyles eventually abandoned the church's Southern Baptist theology, saying it was too liberal. He began calling himself an independent Baptist, untethered to any dogma or ritual he didn't cotton to, unaccountable to any ruling body or person beyond himself. In 1959, he started pastoring at the First Bible Church in Hammond, Indiana, where he pastored until his death. It's also notable that at this time is when he became a full-fledged independent fundamental Baptist, and here is a great clip of him talking about that.
32 years ago, this month, I candidated at First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana. You wouldn't know Dallas County compared to what it was like then. You wouldn't know, somebody said, Brother Hyles, fundamentalists are changing, aren't they? No, fundamentalists don't change. Folks quit being fundamentalists. Fundamentalism can't split. Somebody said, you split in fundamentalism. You can't split fundamentalism. When you leave, when we split, one crowd is not a fundamentalist anymore. And so I'm saying, I've seen it. I've seen the churches in this area that once were great soul-winning citadels become churches that are resting on yesterday's laurels. I've seen churches that once believed right, who are now yoking up with a liberal crowd, or the Southern Baptist crowd, or the John MacArthur crowd, or the charismatic crowd. God says when the troubles come, he said, fight. You can't fight. He said, withstand. You can't withstand. He said, stand. What does it mean to stand? He said, don't change. What? Don't change what? Number one, don't change what you believe. I've been preaching for 43 years. 43 years ago, I believed this book was the Word of God. I still believe this book is the Word of God. My mama taught me that the book she had in her hand was the Word of God and contained the words of God. The book she had in her hand was the King James Bible.
Independent fundamental Baptist churches are not affiliated with mainline Baptist organizational bodies, such as the Southern Baptist Convention or the American Baptist Churches of the USA. They answer to nobody, and their views oftentimes skew towards the extreme side of conservative. There isn't a leader per se to this movement. Instead, it's like a loose partnership or network. Kind of like one of those reward cards that you can use at multiple restaurants. Bear all this in mind, that it is not to be confused with the new IFB, which is a more recent religious movement, and it's spearheaded by none other than Christian supervillain Steven Anderson. For more on him, check out my video. Some tropes of a fundamentalist church that I've noticed include large quiverful families, strict gender roles, strict modesty and purity standards, rigid patriarchal gender roles, inerrancy of the King James Bible, corporal punishment, victim blaming, parentification, xenophobia, and isolation from the outside world. You know what? This is not the look I set out to do, but I really like it, so. Is this over the top? Yes. Do I care? No. Hyles' other claim to fame was pioneering the busing of people from surrounding communities for church services. His bus route ministry consisted of 1,000 workers using 230 buses to ferry as many as 10,000 people every Sunday. And all the way in 2001, a fleet of over 200 buses was regularly packing 7,000 to 15,000 people from all over the area to make sure the pews were packed. To entice kids to get on the buses, which now that I think of it is not such a wholesome concept, they would bribe them with ice cream and pony rides, and at the peak of popularity, attendance for Sunday service was 20,000 people. And they also claimed to have performed 10,000 baptisms a year. There was an intense emphasis on the Sunday school, which was proclaimed to be the biggest in the world according to Christian Life magazine. The mother is off on the wrong foot when she brings her little boy to church, keeps him in her arms, and refuses to put him in the nursery with the other babies. He should become accustomed to being away from mother and father. Hyles encouraged mothers to come back to church days after giving birth. This necessitated the creation of a specific newborn nursery just to accommodate all of the extremely young infants that were being brought in for service. The teachers at the associated schools had to follow a specific curriculum and manual that Hyles wrote himself. This was, of course, a great way to maintain control over his flock. Brainwashing parents and kids alike, that was his MO. In 1972, Jack Hyles and Russell Anderson formed Hyles Anderson College, an unaccredited Bible college that specialized in training Baptist ministers and Christian school teachers. I just wanted to say that I didn't even know that Sekhmet was in the room when I started recording, let alone that she was going to hop up onto my bookshelf and start nibbling on a poisonous plant. She's fine. We've kept an eye on her. She hasn't had any allergic reactions or anything. But, yeah, isn't she great? Hyles Anderson College never sought accreditation because Hyles insisted that school accreditation would undermine his ability to control how the college ought to run. Anyone else starting to feel like this might be a pattern? The first president of Hyles Anderson College was Robert Billings, and after he left the school, he went on to join Jerry Falwell in founding the Moral Majority. Hyles Anderson College boasted all the same hallmarks of a regular sketchy Christian college, including strict dress codes, no music with a beat, early curfew, pajama inspections. Wait, back that up. Female students at Hyles Anderson, Busby recalls, underwent sporadic pajama inspections. If the tops and bottoms didn't match, says Busby, dorm supervisors would sometimes make us strip right there and put on an approved set. The pajama-clad young women would gather in the chapel to wait for Hyles. When he entered, we would all stand on the pew and sing, "We love you, preacher! Oh, yes, we do! We don't love anyone as much as you!" And then he would call us poopsie whoopsie and give us pizza and money. Yet to go off campus to buy pantyhose, required wear for women, we needed a special pass, Busby says, and we had to have 3 chaperones. Yet they would drop us off in rough neighborhoods for 8 hours on our own to go soul winning. Hyles' views on the LGBTQ community were quite notable. For example, he gave great advice on how to spot homosexual behavior in your child, encouraging parents to be mindful of such suspicious behaviors as listening to music alone, playing pool, and, for women, wearing pants. As one would probably expect at this point, Hyles was a prominent misogynist, racist, thief, and philanderer.
Good morning, Brother Hyles. How you doing? You know how Mexicans wake up in the morning? He said, but I'm a Puerto Rican. I said, Puerto Rican ain't nothing but a second-hand Mexican.
And although he didn't invent the concept of biblical submission, he sure enjoyed employing it. The Bible was to be interpreted literally and by Hyles alone. According to his reading, men ruled absolutely. The belief was that women needed to be in complete and total submission to their husbands and to male leadership, says a former member who requested not to be named. If a man did stumble, having an affair, say, or visiting prostitutes or abusing children, the question wasn't how he could have, but rather what the woman or the child did to drive him to such sin, some former church members say. They have a system where abusers and pedophiles can flourish because you can't challenge the men. You have to submit 100% of the time, and whenever anything goes wrong in a marriage, it's because the woman didn't do enough. Hyles was a celebrity in IFB circuits, receiving accolades, praise, and honorary doctorates, and he made a killing off his loyal followers and used his money to buy property, favors, and influence. Hyles encouraged his followers to simply ignore any negative information or influence that pertained to him or the church. He maintained a consistent message that everything was fine and that anyone who said otherwise was not to be trusted under any circumstances. And of course his followers believed without question, many of them having been subliminally controlled since they were infants. They would even drink poison if offered. And that's not a figure of speech.
There are some cult-like tendencies at the church.
Perhaps these former church members recollect Jack Hyles' 1990 poison sermon.
I have some poison I plan to pour in here. Notice the bones and the skull there. Now then, if I walked up tonight and I said to you, I've got something I want you to drink. In fact, Brother Colston, I'd like you, if you don't mind, to drink this. How you like that? He said, if you want me to, I'll drink it. That's what you call real loyalty.
Hyles led his ministry like an organized crime syndicate, complete with lackeys and security guards. And these lackeys have been known to silence victims and harass naysayers.
There's fellows there that are stocking up. I mean, I've talked to some who say, yeah, we're stocking up on weapons.
Why are they stocking up on weapons?
Well, they think that the devil is taking over and that their only hope is to fight and protect that they love and live for.
The place is an armed camp in many ways.
Vic Nishik is a former deacon at Hyles Church. There are people in this church who would kill for Jack Hyles.
That is correct. And I can testify to the fact that when I was under his mind control, I would have killed too if he told me to.
I really wish that I could say that all Hyles did was have shitty beliefs and con people out of donations, but nope. Turns out he had been cheating on his wife with a secretary for 20 years. This next part is from the Your Queer Story podcast. Along with Hyles forcing the husband of the secretary to live in the basement before Jack eventually used church fund to build his lover a home one street behind Hyles' own, in addition to this bombshell were several others, including multiple allegations of embezzlement and misappropriation of funds. Threats and violence against former church members who tried to expose the truth about Hyles, large payoffs made in the form of new vehicles, and down payments on homes for those who helped Hyles cover his tracks. Hyles created what I can only describe as a utopia for pedophiles and abusers. Through his network of churches and pastors trained at his schools, Hyles was able to establish the influences that allowed for systematic abuse as they were taught from birth and reinforced for a lifetime. In 1993, WJBK news station in Detroit, Michigan aired the docuseries Praying from the Pulpit. This series brought to light a myriad of child molestation allegations as well as strange and unusual torture inflicted on kids at several churches across the nation affiliated with the First Baptist Church of Hammond. And I'm going to show you clips from this documentary, and a little warning, it's about to get really fucked up if you would like to skip this part.
He doesn't preach pedophilia, but his brand of Christianity is sexually repressive. Women are taught to be submissive, and children are severely punished if they don't obey the commands of these men of God. He is Mark Folder, a soul winner in the bus ministry of North Sharon Baptist Church, southwest of Ann Arbor. Folder's been in jail since late last year on charges he molested young children who had been brought to the church aboard his bus. At a court hearing earlier this year, 10-year-old JJ told how Folder took him and several other little boys on a church camping trip. JJ and another youngster testified Folder led them in group masturbation sessions and later ordered them into his tent one at a time to be sodomized or perform oral sex. When Folder was arrested, detectives confiscated his Bible, which was autographed by controversial preacher Jack Hyles. Hyles presides over the First Baptist Church of Hammond, Indiana, a fundamentalist house of worship. Hyles despises affiliated Baptists and other Christians who don't share his views. In March, one of Hyles' deacons, A.V. Ballinger, was convicted on charges he molested a 7-year-old girl in Sunday school. A lawsuit by the girl's family charges Hyles told the parents that Deacon Ballinger just likes little girls. Another Hyles protege, Earl Reeves, the pastor of the Lighthouse Baptist Temple in San Diego, California, spent 8 years in prison for molesting young women and grade school girls in his congregation. In Petersburg, Virginia, Calvary Park Baptist Church youth minister Jeffrey Gerald pled guilty to charges he had sex with 11 young girls from his congregation. Gerald was a graduate of the Hyles-Anderson Bible College in Schererville, Indiana. Sharon says the pastor tormented a 10-year-old boy named Bobby. Bobby's divorced mom believed the pastor could teach him some discipline. One example of the pastor's discipline was the time he put a friend's pet boa constrictor in the church baptistry. When the church was dark, he made Bobby strip naked, then get into baptistry water. Then he pulled the ladders out, leaving the 10-year-old in the water with the giant snake. Sharon says Bobby was subjected to physical torture, too.
Well, one time on a desert trip, Bobby had been naughty and somehow had gotten the pastor angry at him. And so, to punish him, he decided to put some hot peppers in his rectum. Another form of punishing Bobby was when he was naughty, that the pastor would take the glass insert that went on top of a coffee table that he had, and he would put Bobby's penis down on the table and then lay the glass on top of that and push down on it or something to punish Bobby.
If you weren't dead inside after watching those clips, this next one ought to do the trick.
In 1981, he preached a sermon to his fellow pastors about how young girls' bodies were like the Holy Temple. He put a young girl named Arlene on display beside him as a visual aid for hundreds of other preachers as he thundered about the high priest entering the Holy Temple. This is a preacher who's used his pulpit to defend one of his deacons convicted of molesting a 7-year-old girl.
Arlene, you're very touchable for a young man. And I'm too old to even see you. But I could see why 100 young men want to touch her, couldn't you?
The worst of these abusers, in my opinion, is Jack's son, David Hyles. David was truly an evil man who made child porn with a young student and maintained a pattern of sadistic rape and abuse towards women and girls at several churches. He would also have orgies with his wife and other church members, but that's a basket of puppies compared to everything else in the story, and seriously, it never ends with these people. And to me, the most shocking allegation about David Hyles is that he allegedly killed his stepson. Well, roll the tape.
I want to welcome all of our guests tonight. Tell you something.
David Hyles set out to follow in his father's footsteps, but his zest for women cost him his pulpit and his first marriage. When David left a Texas church in disgrace, he and his girlfriend, Brenda Stevens, moved to Bolingbrook, Illinois, with her 2 children by her first marriage. It wasn't long before her youngest son, 17-month-old Brent Stevens, came to the attention of abuse investigators. In 1985, they found him with a broken leg plus 8 or 9 bones in various stages of healing. Paul Cialino was a homicide investigator for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. He and his team fought, unsuccessfully, to keep Brent away from David and Brenda.
I wasn't concerned this child was going to be abused again. I was concerned this kid was going to wind up dead. That was my concern.
His concern was justified. A few months later, Brent Stevens was found dead in his crib. Due to bureaucratic bungling, an inconclusive autopsy was done at a hospital instead of the morgue. But at the inquest, David Hyles invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. Brenda, the mother of the dead child, was a no-show. As for the status of the investigation,
This case is an open case still today, and nothing's been done.
can anything be done with this?
Absolutely, it's a murder case. I would even go further and say that if I could get David and Brenda in a court of law, they'd both get convicted of murder, without a doubt. I have a dead child with a history of abuse, and I had 2 people who were the only people access to that child that night. And I would almost bet that 12 of their peers would convict them on almost that evidence alone.
David Hyles had another son die from being ran over by a car in 1999, and while I don't know the circumstances behind that particular situation, it seems not insignificant. David Hyles received no substantial punishment besides being shunned by his dad's church, and most of the abusers featured in this episode only served a few years in jail, and then they were free to go back to molesting their flock. February 6, 2001, Jack Hyles died from complications following heart surgery at age 74. He left behind a legacy of systematic rape and abuse, mind control, and financial exploitation. But our story does not end there. No, far from it. Jack Scop is the former son-in-law of Jack Hyles, and he took over the church following Hyles' death. Jack Scop, of course, is famous for being a creepy pervert. Here he is talking about polishing the shaft, which I think is supposed to be a metaphor, but it sure doesn't look like a metaphor. I would put on headphones or not be in a crowd of people when you watch this next part.
Of course it hurts. Of course there's fire. Of course there's pain. Of course there's, that's hot. God says, shut up. I can handle it. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. Oh, God, that hurts. Oh, God, I'm so tired. Oh, God, I didn't want to lose her. Oh, God, I didn't want to have that pain. Oh, God, no. Oh. God, you love me so much, don't you? Yes. Oh, God, thank you for what you're making me. You're welcome. Oh, God. I see an opportunity. Yeah, so do I. Oh, God, I see a beautiful wife. Yeah. I never dreamed of her. A lot of things you never dreamed of, son. Lots of things you never dreamed of. Oh, you think I can marry her? She's very, very polished. You better get her more polished, son. Hey, God! The little children, I hold my arms. Oh, it's sweetest thing in the whole world. Oh, I'm so honored to be their daddy. Now, you remember who owns them. Make sure they serve me. That's why I gave them to you, son. Oh, God. I see a pulpit. I see a pulpit. God says, Not done working on you, son. You think I stand here before you tonight sorry that I yielded to God? You think I stand here tonight with these, my trusted men, sorry that I yielded? You think I'm regretting that I yielded to God? You think I'm sorry when I see this crowd here tonight? No. Oh, God, keep polishing. Keep polishing.
Jack Scopp is also a convicted sex offender and a notable piece of shit. He is currently in prison right now for raping a 16-year-old girl while he was counseling her. He also transported her across state lines to facilitate these crimes. And I have read that apparently all of his sermons were weird and sexual like that, so in 2020 he requested early release to take care of his parents, which he was not granted. His wife has since divorced him, so that's nice. So what about everybody else? Where are they now? After Hyles' passing in 2001, his wife Beverly moved to Texas and served as a Sunday school teacher in the Missions-Minded Department Senior Women's class at the Southern Baptist-affiliated First Baptist Church of Dallas under Pastor Robert Jeffries. That's a lot of words. Beverly Hyles died at the age of 88 on August 30th, 2017. Jack Hyles' daughter, Linda Hyles Murphey, is now a motivational speaker. She presented her story titled From Cult to Courage at a TEDx event, discussing her hardships growing up as a child of Jack Hyles. She has since spoken out against the church that Hyles led during his tenure and after his death. David Hyles, on the other hand, is, I guess, not back on his bullshit. He never stopped being on his bullshit, but with new survivors coming forward every day to share their stories of abuse at the hands of David, we're probably going to be hearing about this sick fuck for a while. And besides sending creepy texts to young women, he runs a ministry for those who have fallen in grace. Is that an onion? This is a program where people pay him money to say that they've been reformed. Where have I seen this before?
And they let me go with the proper paperwork clearing me of everything. I would like to add into evidence Article 1. Mac, will you please read this document?
Mm-hmm. By the power of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Reed Mental Institution hereby decrees Frank Reynolds to not have donkey brains.
What? That is an official document.
There are some really good sources on this website to help you overcome your perversions. I mean, coming out of the unnatural lifestyle. In this sex-crazed society in which we live, there is a difficulty with our minds. Even men who would not consider themselves to be attracted to the same sex will eventually have sexual attraction if they watch enough porn. What we see fills our minds, and what fills our minds programs our desires. How do people get into so much deviant sexual activity? It's simple. They feed their minds with it. What they fed their minds created an attraction that became sexual. If I may be so frank, I am attracted to horses. However, I have never had sexual attraction to a horse. Yet, there are some who have. Why? Because their minds have become deviant. If I may be so frank, I am attracted to... Oh, yep. There you go. If there is anything positive to be gleaned from the story we just explored, it's that the clock is running out for these abusers. With new books, channels, podcasts, and documentaries coming out all the time exploring these creeps, it seems to be only a matter of time before they start to crumble. In 2018, investigative reporter Sarah Smith called attention to more than 400 individuals who had been abused at the hands of these IFB monsters. Furthermore, she pointed out that these abusers were being shuffled around to a new church every time they got caught offending.
The Independent Fundamental Baptist Church play in allowing so many of these allegations to go unreported to law enforcement?
The culture in the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church plays a tremendous role in keeping these abuse allegations quiet. The pastor is considered the ultimate authority, and it's unthinkable to go against the advice of your pastor. So if your pastor downplays the allegations, if your pastor says don't report to law enforcement, then it's extremely hard to go against that recommendation. Women and children are at the very bottom of the hierarchy in many of these churches, so their voices aren't heard as strongly when they do speak up to report abuse. The churches also preach a doctrine of separation, which means they have to be separate from non-believers and the rest of the world, and that in many cases is interpreted to include authorities.
There's a lot to keep track of, lots of names, cases, sentencing, religious doctrine, etc. It's all very hard to keep straight, and it's honestly kind of overwhelming. So for more information, please check out the Preacher Boys podcast. At this point of the story, the IFB feels as old as time. Extreme fundamentalist Christian beliefs were utilized by a collective of monsters to found a church on a framework of submission and insular influence. From there, abuse can be perpetrated freely without fear of consequence or reprisal. I think I can say comfortably that most, if not all kinds of these cults we've covered on Fundie Fridays shift into this similar mold. What sets Hyles apart from the rest is the sheer magnitude of the abuse empire he was able to accomplish and the extreme resistance to consequences that his form of control allowed him to enjoy. Particularly, his use of early childhood education to advance his messages into the very young served to dig the roots of Hyles' control into a follower's mind in an exceptionally perverse way. Beyond what is currently known about the Catholic Church, I have not been able to identify a religious organization that was able to more effectively develop a network of active abusers to perpetuate and evade at will. It would do us all well to remember just how big these kinds of organizations can get right under our noses. And oddly enough, I think that Hyles' church network is the closest thing we have to a real-life case of an insular sadistic sex cult that everyone said the Satanists were. Oh, how the altar turns, right? Hope you guys enjoyed that video. I wanted to say that I am going to start putting content warnings at the beginning of the episode. But in older episodes, the content warnings, resources, and makeup that I used is always in the info box. And if there is ever something where you're like, that should probably have a warning and I didn't think of it, feel free to tell me. I also want to say that pretty much all of the articles and documentaries I watched about this subject used the pray pun, and I just want to say how much I appreciate that. It's a classic figure of speech. Love it. Also, please let me know if my microphone sounds any better this time, because I'm really trying. On Valentine's Day, we are planning to do a fun stream of some games. It was originally supposed to be a celebration of 20,000 subscribers, but we have since surpassed that. So, also, I was on the Free Interns and Counting podcast, and let me tell you, that was like the best day of my life, and you all should really check it out. These gals are extremely funny, extremely smart, beautiful. I want to be their best friends, so please check them out. That is in the info box below, as well as links to the other things that I talked about and the documentary that I pulled a bunch of clips from. If you would like to support me financially, go ahead and follow me on Patreon. I have an Instagram, a Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Please remember to consensually smash that like and subscribe button. Hit the bell if you'd like to be notified when I make new content. I love you very much, and have a very blessed day.
Jack Hyles has surrounded himself with a well-armed security force. Uniformed men with karate-type nightsticks.